Simba, the son of King Mufasa, has his right to the throne of Pride Rock challenged when his evil uncle Scar causes tragedy to occur, which results in Simba's banishment from the Pride Lands. This movie is yet another remake from Disney of one of their classic movies, and one that I was actually pretty excited for, but also really nervous. The original movie is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's within the top 5 for sure. That movie, in my mind, is a perfect movie for a multitude of reasons, so while I was excited to see a new take on the classic story, I was also extremely nervous because The Lion King is a movie that is very close to my heart and a huge part of my childhood. However, this movie is also at the helm of Jon Favreau, who also did The Jungle Book, which I really enjoyed, and he also did Elf, Iron Man, and Iron Man 2, which we don't talk about. Anyway, onto The Lion King. One thing that you have to praise this movie for, whether you love it or hate it, is the visuals. This movie is visually breathtaking. It is unbelievable how photorealistic this movie looks, despite almost all of it being CGI. Everything from the animals, the bugs, and even the blades of freaking grass looks real and natural. They really did capture the beauty and majesty of the African landscape and wildlife in this movie, which just made me feel so nostalgic because I was seeing animals that I hadn't seen since the early days of my childhood. It almost made me feel like I was home again. The CG is beautifully rendered to perfection, and I really gotta give it to the effects team that worked on this movie because they have created something truly remarkable. I also really enjoyed Favreau's direction of the musical sequences. Obviously, seen as how this is a more realistic take on The Lion King, it is nowhere near as cartoony as the original movie. So I was curious to see how he would handle the aspects of the movie that in the original were more cartoony and over the top. I'm pretty happy with the way he helmed the musical sequences because despite being more grounded in realism, they still felt really creative and visually dazzling to look at because of the wide range of colors used in these scenes as well as the visuals. The singing is also really good in this movie. Granted, some are better than others, but I feel that everyone who sings in this movie does the best they can to a satisfying degree. 50% of the scenes from the original movie are recreated masterfully in this movie and are just as emotionally impactful as they were in the original. But that's not the case with the other 50%. Unfortunately, much of this movie isn't as emotionally impactful as it was in the original movie, and it can be argued that that is due to the choice to go with a more photorealistic approach. I do like how photorealistic everything looks. I would even go as far as to say that making the movie look this way gives it its own visual style even when it recreates scenes from the original. However, that does come at a cost, that being the facial expressions and body language. The characters in this movie don't exhibit the same level of emotion that they were in the original animated movie. A lot of the time the characters have the exact same facial expression on their face, even in the more dramatic or darker moments of the movie. I do wish they could have at least tried to give the characters a little more facial expressions and emotion, because it's almost like the characters aren't even reacting to anything that happens. In the gorge scene where Simba sees what he sees and screams, "No!" You can't even see any pain, shock, or fear in his eyes, or anywhere on his face. It just looks like a lion cub opening his mouth. The Lion King also has a serious lack of personality. Much of the story's humor and mysticism has been removed in an attempt to make a more epic and serious movie, and it really doesn't have to be. For example, Rafiki is one of my favorite characters in the original, and this scene between him and Simba is actually my favorite part of the original, partly because of how uplifting, heartwarming, and meaningful it is, but also because of how freaking hilarious it is. I've always looked at Rafiki as a guy who acts like an idiot, and yet he's the wisest character in the whole movie. He's a deeply intelligent character who has a sense of humor, a great one at that, and his sense of humor is part of what makes him who he is. Yet, for some strange reason, this movie removes practically all of this character's humor, which is a shame because Rafiki's sense of humor is a key and integral part of this character. In fact, quite a few integral character building moments are removed in this movie, which, as a result, makes the finale feel less impactful. Removing Rafiki's humor just makes him bland and one-dimensional because he's no longer the funny wise guy, he's just the wise guy. Speaking of the changes this movie made, there is some new stuff that I actually like. For starters, they completely changed the hyena characters, which was a risk, but it pays off. The hyenas for me were one of the best parts of this movie, and most of their jokes hit, but they were also a lot more menacing and creepy than they were in the original, which surprised me, but in a good way. They also gave some characters that didn't have much to do in the original more things to do and more character development, which was also a welcome addition, although the other changes I wasn't such a fan of, mainly because the other changes are barely changes at all. Most of them are either elongated or shorter versions of scenes from the original, which made me think, what's the point? It's just the same scene but longer or shorter, and it doesn't really add anything to the movie. I mean, the Be Prepared scene is incredibly shortened for some reason. Also hilariously, and I know this is kind of a nitpick, but I want to talk about it anyway, the "Can you feel the love tonight" scene is now in broad daylight. It's a shame because the changes they made in terms of taking certain characters in different directions, minus Rafiki, were actually really interesting and I wanted more of that. Wouldn't it have been cool if this movie took the same story in a different direction and focused on things that the original didn't, all while still retaining its personality? To its credit, the movie is paced pretty well despite being slightly longer than the original. It is still a pretty fast-paced movie. There is always something going on, so you're never bored out of your mind waiting for something to happen. Even if you're a hater of the live-action Disney remakes, I think you'd be able to sit through this one thanks to the visuals and pacing alone. This movie has some really bad editing at times. There are points where the movie jumps between shots too quickly, making the flow of time within the movie feel unnatural and inconsistent. Even the way the dialogue is cut together at times feels unnatural and scripted. There are many points where a character says something that is meant to create tension or enforce the drama, and for this drama to be reinforced there would have to be a pause before the other character responds, because it signifies a huge moment of emotional weight for that character. The original movie understood that. This movie, for some strange reason, doesn't. Characters just seem to have an answer for everything pretty much straight away, almost without consideration, which derails the drama and vitality and ruins the natural flow of the dialogue because it doesn't sound like natural dialogue, it sounds scripted. With all that said, I did enjoy many of the vocal performances. Hearing James Earl Jones' voice coming out of Mufasa again is music to my ears. He is so good in this movie. Donald Glover does a pretty good job as Simba, although I don't think he had that much of a chance to really sell it, but he still did a pretty good job with what he was given to work with. The hyenas played by Florence Kasumba, Eric Andre, and Keegan-Michael Key are great. Timon and Pumbaa are my favorite part of this movie. Much of their banter and bickering from the original has been retained here whenever these two were arguing or just having a conversation with each other. It was amazing. Billy Eichner, I'm sorry sir, I cannot pronounce your name, but you and Seth Rogen did a fantastic job of portraying these characters. Seriously, Seth Rogen laughing as Pumbaa is something I never knew I wanted. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the rest of the voice cast. For example, Beyonce as Nala didn't really work for me. It didn't feel like she was putting enough emotion into her vocal performance, making her performance feel bland and forgettable and honestly kind of robotic. Chiwetel Ejiofor is one of my favorite actors working today, but I did not like him as Scar. He wasn't as charismatic or over the top as Jeremy Irons was as a character. He gave a very wooden performance that just wasn't as intimidating or even as threatening as Irons was. When Jeremy Irons delivers a line, "Run away and never return," it sounds cold and threatening and intimidating, and excuse the terrible impression, but you get my point, right? Whereas when Ejiofor does it, it's literally just, "Run away and never return." You see what I'm getting at? The actors who portrayed Simba and Nala as children weren't too good either, but I don't think that was their fault, because it almost feels like the director said to them, "Okay, here's a line from the original, just say it. That's all you gotta do, just say it." I know, it sounds like I really hate this movie, but I actually thought it was okay. At the very least, it was an entertaining and at times nostalgic watch. I do like it more than I dislike it, and love or hate this movie, you really have to give props to the visual effects artists working behind the scenes because the CG in this movie is truly groundbreaking. I just wish it was in a better movie. I wish Favreau had tried more to take the same story but in a different direction instead of just needlessly shortening or increasing the length of certain scenes. I'm still gonna buy this movie on Blu-ray because I want to know how they made those incredible visual effects, but I can also still watch this movie and have a decent time. But if someone asked me if I wanted to watch this movie or the original, I'm just gonna pick the original because that movie has a personality, it has vitality, and it has drama. And unfortunately, all of those things are virtually non-existent in this movie. So with that said, The Lion King gets a 6 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on The Lion King. I do hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, and Stardust. Yes, I got Stardust back, thank God. Those will be linked down in the description below. But before I go, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of The Lion King? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will indeed see you guys in the next one. Once again, thanks for watching, and take care.